All right, we're going to get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Humphreys, and I'm the Program Director for Junior Achievement of New Mexico. Welcome to our Inspiring NM Student Conference, and thank you to the New Mexico Society of CPAs who has partnered with Junior Achievement to make this amazing conference possible. This conference was designed to provide New Mexico students with the opportunity to hear the personal journeys of business professionals in various careers in finance. During the remaining 4 weeks of this conference, we will feature 2 speakers per week, a speaker on Wednesday afternoons at 1 o'clock and Thursday mornings at 10:30. During these events, you will hear our speakers share details about their education, their job, and their career journey, as well as some very valuable skills and concepts for your own future economic success. So before we get started, our virtual meeting reminders. Like I said earlier, the video is recorded, and so please make sure that you share that link with anyone who missed the session today. You can share that YouTube link with them. And then at this time, if you could please type your first and last name into the chat box, that will help us keep track of anyone who is on the call with us today. And for educators and parents that are on the call, please type in how many students you have with you. That'll help us track that as well. During the speaker's presentation, please make sure your mics are muted. And if you have questions during the presentation, please just jot them down into the chat box and I'll facilitate that when the time comes, or you can unmute and you can ask the question live. Today, we are so excited to welcome Liesl Schmidt. She is the Consumer and Business Banking Regional Executive for U.S. Bank. We are honored and thrilled to have her share her story with you today. Liesl, I'll mute and you can have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate the time and super excited to be here today to share my story. So I thought what I would do is kind of start out with high school, and then I'll work my way up to how I got to where I am today. And I promise I won't, take 45 minutes to do this. So, when I was in high school, my parents were very adamant that I went to college. And this was something that I also had a desire to do. But of course, at times, like any high school student, sometimes there were days where I thought, why am I taking these classes and why am I doing some of these things just so that I can get into college? Well, I did get into college. I went to University of Maryland. And a lot of the reason that I was able to go there was because my parents took the time to make sure that I was in those college prep. That's what we called them back then. I think they're called advanced classes and other things now. And my story is kind of interesting because when I went to school, I didn't go to school full time. So I went to the University of Maryland, but I didn't actually go to the University of Maryland campus in Maryland. I went in Japan, and we lived there for 3 years, and it was more of a night school type environment where you would go in the evenings and do classes, and then I would work full time during the day. But again, getting a college education was very important to me. And I wanted to make sure that I had that in my back pocket, if you will, so that I could make sure that when opportunities came available, I had that experience. So when I was going to school, one of my first jobs that I ever had was a teller at a bank in Japan. And it was a bank that was actually on an Air Force base. And we had yen and dollars in our teller boxes, which at that time were not computerized. So this was back in the 80s, and we did not have any computers in the bank outside of a word processor. So I did that for a number of years, and then actually went to work for the University of Maryland within their, I guess their admissions program or admissions department. They then, I was able then to finish my education. And at the same time, we moved back to Sacramento, California, where I actually got a job as a word processor in a bank. And lucky for me, there was a lady named Kathleen who took a real interest in my career and in me and plucked me out of the word processing pool and made me her administrative assistant. From there, I went on to be a credit analyst within that bank, and then worked for a couple other community banks along the way. After that, I went into a business banking. And so business banking is different in that you are going out and calling on business customers to make sure that we can help them with whatever their goals or their financial needs are. So as an example, a business might want to buy a building and we would help them get a loan for that building. Or a business would want to take credit cards, and so we help them get set up so they can accept credit cards. Or maybe they want to have credit cards where all of their customers or all of their employees can use the card, and then they will have kind of a central area where they can keep track of it from a budgetary standpoint. So I did that for a number of years, and it was a lot of fun because I got to learn about a lot of different businesses, and it was kind of something new every day. But it was also really fun to watch people's dreams come true. So I was able to do that for a number of years. And then I had the opportunity to become a leader. And I actually got to lead a business banking team. So I was able to expand my ability to help different types of businesses and learn about different businesses, and then also help develop employees, which was super fun. Let's see, somebody just came up with a question. Do you want me to answer the questions, Lindsay, as they come in, or do you? No?
No, we'll facilitate during the
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay, great, thanks. So I did that, led a team for probably 12 or 13 years. That was super fun. I learned a lot of lessons along the way. Leadership definitely opens you up to lots of different situations and scenarios, a lot of them fun, sometimes not so fun. And so I had a great opportunity to do that, built a team in Northern California, and then had the opportunity to move into, my boss retired, and I moved into what was called a region president role. And at that point, I was overseeing all of Northern California. So that would, for those of you that are familiar with California, it would be Sacramento North. Did that for a couple of years, and then had a really, really cool opportunity because of some networking that I had done. So just to back up a little bit, one thing that I've learned over my career is networking is very important. And people sometimes don't put it as one of their important things that they do, but it is probably one of the most valuable things you can do. Partly because it helps you to navigate through your career, to reach out to people when maybe you need a solution or you have a problem or something needs to get solved. And then also from on a more selfish basis, because it gives you the opportunity to meet people who can help you to expand in your career and offer you opportunities and talk about you when nobody is around, or you're not around to talk about yourself in a positive way. So I had this really awesome networking experience with a man named Mark, and he decided that he wanted to help me out because he really liked my style and liked the things that I was doing, some of the ideas that I had. So we worked together for a couple of years on what we called a sponsorship, and just would have meetings, talk about different things, talk about different ideas. And so when an opportunity came open for me to take over 5 states, doing similar to what I was doing in my region president role, he gave me that opportunity. And so I actually moved to Colorado, and I oversaw the states of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and a little bit of Utah. And what I did in those states is what I'm doing today, which is overseeing branches. So when you walk into a bank, into a branch in some of these states, in like New Mexico, in a U.S. bank branch, those folks report up to me through multiple other layers in there. Of course, we have Paul and Aaron, who are absolutely fabulous down there, that report into me. And then also there's business banking teams that report into Paul that then ultimately report into me. So now I get to take what I did on the business banking side, what I did when I was a teller and work in that side, and then put it all together in my role that I'm in today. And recently I was actually promoted again in an expanded role over 10 states in the West. So Idaho, Washington, California, Northern Nevada, Oregon, lots of cool spots, and again, meet a lot of cool people. So, I think it's really important for people to realize that there's nothing that you can't do if you're willing to take the risk, if you network, and you do your best every day at work. And so if those are things that you're willing to do, the sky's the limit on what a person can do within their career. And sometimes what we want to do in our career changes over the course of time. My career is more of what I would call a ladder, but a lot of people that I know have done more of a jungle gym where maybe they haven't stayed within a specific department or a specific group. They've gone from different departments and different jobs, different companies, and they've also been able to move up and do what plays best to their strengths. So really encourage people to seek out different perspectives, look at different ways of doing things, and never say never. My mom used to always say that, never say never, because you just don't know what an opportunity might bring. So with that, I think that, one of the things that obviously we spent a lot of time doing with businesses was talking about budgets and income statements and ways that they could make their businesses better. So I thought it might be fun for us to go through a budgeting exercise today and talk about what a budget is and how each of you can think about your budget. So let's go to the next slide. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is some key terms when you think about a budget. So there's different types of expenses, and this is one where I think people sometimes really have to take a step back and say, okay, when I'm doing a budget, we always think about our fixed expenses. So what we know we're going to have to pay every month, like rent as an example, or a mortgage. So you know that that's a fixed expense and you know you're going to have to pay it every month. And so it's important to think about those things, but it's also important to think about other types of expenses that you might have to put into the budget, because those a lot of times are the ones that we forget about. So let's go to the next slide. So we talked about fixed expenses. So let's go to the next slide. So the next expense that people need to think about is variable expenses. So variable expenses are expenses that you likely have from month to month, but they're not always the same. So, whereas you have rent that is always the same, your food bill, for example, might be different from month to month. So how much you would actually spend on your groceries can vary based on what you purchase, maybe where you're shopping, what your situation is for that month. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Periodic expenses. So this, I think, is the periodic expenses is the one that always gets me, right? Those expenses that maybe you don't really think about until all of a sudden something's due. And so it's not something that you'll pay on a monthly basis. It might be something you only pay annually. It might be something that you pay quarterly. Maybe you pay every 6 months, but it's something that you typically do have to pay and you are responsible for, but it's not something that's maybe going to always be right at the forefront of your thoughts when you're thinking about expenses. And that's why it's so important to look at your budget on a 12-month basis, because that's where you will make sure that you're encompassing all of that so that you can save money if you need to for things like these periodic expenses. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so I think what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about a sample budget, right? So obviously, if we have a budget, we have fixed expenses and variable expenses, and we need to have some sort of income to make sure that we can pay all of those fixed expenses and those variable expenses. So let's go to the next slide. So our income are things that what are things that you might want to include in income? Okay, so there is, if you have a job, you would include whatever your pay is from the job. Now, many of us have jobs where we get paid a set amount monthly, and many of us have jobs where we get paid maybe an hourly wage and we don't work the same hours every month, or we do work the same hours every month, but maybe we get overtime. So there could be some variables in there, but what I would recommend is kind of think about what am I going to be doing this month and then budget in advance. So if you know that you're going to work 35 hours a week every week, then budget at that. And then if you work overtime or something like that, then you could always put that into a savings account or use it as extra money to do that extra thing that you maybe couldn't fit into your budget. So what other things, so you have your fixed expenses. So again, and this is probably kind of hard for some people to see, but again, when we think about fixed expenses, we think about things that are the same amount every month. So for example, for myself, my mortgage is the same every month. My car payment is the same every month. My telephone, my wireless phone, cell phone is the same every month. I don't have a landline anymore. So those are things that I know every month exactly what that expense is going to be. And so I can easily budget for those fixed expenses. So then let's go to our variable expenses. So the variable expenses are the ones that I think get us a lot more. And a lot of times we have to really take a step back and say, okay, what can I afford to spend and what can I not afford to spend? So groceries would be a variable expense. That one is probably easier to control than, let's say, dining out. So dining out is something that a lot of people like to do. You know, you want to get your Starbucks, you want to go out to dinner with friends, whatever it is that you like to do. But this can be an expense that can add up quickly. And so you really need to think about, how do I make sure that I'm controlling that expense? And so one idea might be your dining out budget. Maybe it's something that you have saved up and that's what you use for that month, that upcoming month, instead of trying to work it into your income for the existing month, because that might vary from month to month. So it's a little bit easier to actually make sure that you stay within that budget. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So here we're going to look at very specific examples and put them into the chart for each of these expenses. So remember, we were talking earlier about expenses that might only happen annually. So our first expense is yearly medical checkup of $60. So that would be a great example of a periodic expense. So then entertainment, $20 to $40 per month. So that is something that we are going to do every month, and we have set aside this amount of money to make sure that we can have fun and go do what we want to do, whatever that might be. But it varies. It could be $20, could be $30, could be $35, could be $40. So that would go into our variable expense. So our babysitting earnings. So babysitting earnings are the money that we have to spend. So that would go into our income. So we talked about mobile phone bill. So our mobile phone bill, we know, is $35 every month. So that would be a fixed expense. So pay stub for $300. That's our job. That's what we do each month. And we know that we're going to get that money based on the work that we do. So we would put that into our income. So here's another yearly expense, car insurance. Now we know that the expense is going to be $600, but it's only going to be once a year. So we would put it into our periodic expense. Gasoline. Now this is another great example of something that we don't have specific control over. So we have to kind of say, okay, what do I think the range is going to be, and then budget accordingly. So that would be a variable expense. Oh, this is a great one. I don't get these anymore, but I know my daughter always says, you know, I wish grandma was still sending me checks instead of sending them when I was little. I really could use them more as an adult than as a child. So that would go into an income. And here's the groceries. That would be a variable expense because we don't know if we're going to spend $50 or up to $70. So an oil change, that would be a periodic expense because we don't get an oil change every single month. So monthly car payment, we talked about that. That's a fixed expense. And then a weekly bus pass. Again, we know what that cost is going to be, and we know we're going to get it every week. So that would be a fixed expense. Great. So when we think about our budgets, we have to think about, okay, what is our income going to be? What are things that we have to spend money on each month? Gas, the bus pass, groceries, the electricity bill, all of that. And then we look at what our income is, how much those expenses are that we have to spend, and then we have what's left over, and that's what we get to use for the things that we really want to do, or the entertainment. And sometimes we have to make tough choices, right? Like maybe we want to get a big pickup for a car, but we can only afford a little pickup for a payment based on what our budget is. So those are choices that we have to make. Or maybe we want to get a bigger house, but we can't afford a bigger house because it doesn't fit into the budget. So we have to get a little bit smaller house. And so there's going to be constantly choices that we have to make based on what our budget is. And then what we can do is we can say, okay, what can I do if I want to get that bigger house? What can I do within my budget? Can I save an extra $100 a month? Can I get a better job, a higher paying job that will increase my income so that I can get that bigger house? Or save more money so that I can put more money down on that bigger house, or same with a car. So these are all choices that we're constantly having to make. We make them throughout our entire life, no matter what your situation is. You're always going to have to make choices on what fits into your budget, so that you always make sure that you don't spend more money than what your income is. Okay, Lindsay, I think that's it for the budget lesson.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. Let's move into the Q&A since that's all fresh in our brains. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to pose into the chat about budgets? I think we had one come through earlier, so I'll start us off. At what age can a young person become a bank teller?
So at US Bank, we will hire, I believe, at age 18. So that's, I don't think we can do anything younger than that.
Excellent, thank you. So question from the registration. Was there ever a time that you messed up when you were at work or you failed? And then how did you recover?
Sure. Well, first of all, there's lots of times that I mess up at work and that I have failed. But I will tell you of one that happened very early in my career that still to this day sticks in my head. So I had mentioned that in my teller box, which was literally a wooden box, I had dollars and I had yen. And so we were living in Japan and we were on base. And so people would come in and they would exchange dollars for yen so that they could go buy stuff off base, or they would maybe have yen from something they got paid or something, and then they would bring it to change it to dollars. And so I had to do the exchange in my head. And one of the times I was off at the end of the day by 10,000 yen, which is a lot of money. It's not $10,000, but it still is, you know, a significant amount of money. I couldn't tell you what it is right now off the top of my head, which is, you know, probably because I put it out in my head on how to do the exchange rate. But it was a lot of money. And so I had to go to my boss and let them know, hey, you know, I'm off of this money. I'm really sorry. I think I knew where it went, but the person that I gave the extra 10,000 yen to didn't bring it back, right? They just took it. So, which, you know, is fine. I mean, it's not stealing. It was a mistake and maybe they didn't realize it. So I had to go to my boss and let them know, and she was really nice. And then but she made me also go to her boss and let him know. And he did give me a very stern lecture about, $91, somebody said, is what it would have been today. So, you know, that's a significant amount of money. And back then, I don't know what the exchange rate is today, but that seemed like a much bigger amount to me at the time. And I volunteered to pay the money. I said, I'll give you the $91, but I guess that's not how it works. You can't do that. And that's still the case today. But it really stuck in my head about how I have to be really careful about what I do. I have to make sure that I double count things back to people, make sure things aren't sticking together, and just make sure that I'm really taking time to do my job instead of rushing through things. The other thing that it taught me is that if I ever do get money, extra money by accident from someone, I always take it back because knowing how stressed out I was and how scared I was, that I was going to get fired. I would never want somebody else to feel like that. And so I always make sure that I pay my bills, and I always make sure that if I end up with something that isn't mine, that I take it back.
Excellent advice. Questions from the chat. Miss Casey has a student named Sammy, and he is curious if you learned how to speak Japanese when you were in college and if you can still speak it.
We did not learn a lot of Japanese. I did actually take Japanese class. So I can say the Ohio gozaimasu. Let's see, I was trying to think of some other ones. Konnichiwa, which is good afternoon. Ohio gozaimasu is good morning. I used to be able to say thank you, and now I can't even remember what that is. Surprisingly, the Japanese do not like to speak Japanese to Americans. They actually want to speak English. So we would go, and the Japanese people are very, very nice, very welcoming, very friendly. That was my experience when I was there. So we would go on the train and we would go, all over Japan. They have an absolutely fabulous train system. And we would go all over touring, and we would ask questions and we would try to talk Japanese. And then they would say, no, talk English, because they learn English there, but they have a really hard time with the accent, just like we have a really hard time with a lot of accents that we're not familiar with. And so they wanted to practice on us. So they would speak English to us, and they wanted to speak English, which, in some countries, they want you to speak their language. In Japan, they wanted to practice English. So we talked a lot of English in Japan, which I guess was nice for us, but it wasn't good for our Japanese learning of the language.
Excellent. Another question from Miss Casey's class. Andrew wants to know, what strengths are beneficial for having a banking job?
Oh, a lot. First of all, I think the thing that let me say a little bit about banking. A lot of people think that a bank is a building where you go in, you open up new accounts, and you cash checks. And there is so much more going on behind the scenes at a bank that really any strength could find a job within a bank. So you have people who are doing analysis in a bank. You have people who are very detail oriented, and they're constantly thinking about risk and what we can and can't do. You have people who are very good with numbers, and then you have people who are very good with marketing. So maybe a person isn't, math is not their thing. They're not that's not what they find fun in, but they really enjoy marketing and figuring out what people like and what attracts people. And so they could be a marketing person. We have people who focus just on communications and how to communicate well. So they don't necessarily even know anything about banking, but they know how to communicate well and how to. Well, as an example, the communications group helped me with the PowerPoint slide that I did today, right? So they came out and they said, hey, here's something that we think would resonate with the group. It coincides with banking, but it also is something that this group of people would be interested in. So they help us with that. So you could pretty much have any strength and be a banker. For me, and kind of how my career went, a couple of good strengths to have were being a relator, enjoying people, liking to have that communication with people and be in contact with people. I also happen to be good with numbers, and I like to solve problems and puzzles. And so all of those things play really well into commercial banking and business banking, because you're always trying to help people figure out, what do I need to do in order to reach my goals? But again, I would say just you really, the basis of banking is kind of how I think of it is, if you have an interest in helping people, no matter what your strengths are, you can find joy in banking and will likely be able to find a job.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to a question about budgeting. So you mentioned having like a line budget of all the things like your entertainment, your all of your fixed variable, everything like that. So what is the best way to track that information and lump it together for young people to figure out what classifies as entertainment, what classifies as those different line items that you would need for a budget?
Sure. Well, first of all, you could use the US Bank app because it actually now will tell you, how much you spent here, how much you spent in different areas. So that's one option. There's a lot of different apps that people could use, and it will actually kind of categorize it for you. But I think that if you, from my perspective, how I've done it in the past is I actually look at what I've spent historically on things or what I want to spend, and then I categorize them on an Excel spreadsheet or some type of a form. So as an example, if I know that I like to go out every weekend on Friday and Saturday with my friends, go dancing, then I would say, okay, well, what's my cover charge going to be? Am I going to buy, food? Am I going to buy drinks? And then kind of how much that's going to cost, and then estimate. Now, what might happen is I might find out, I can't afford to do it every night, every weekend night. So maybe I can only go on Friday nights, or I can only go on Saturday nights. And then, like I was saying, also, if you have extra money that you get, like as an example, you work overtime. Overtime should be something that you don't depend on, but you use it as either to save or as to do that extra thing that you want to do. Maybe it's a vacation fund, something like that, or, grandma's money or the babysitting money, if that's an extra job. Should all be things that you can do, kind of make sure that you're not depending on something that you don't have 100% control over.
Excellent. Thank you. A question from the chat. Do you recommend young people opening a checking or a savings account in high school?
Yes, I do. And you can also, you can work with your parents to help you get that set up. But I definitely recommend that. And I recommend that if your parents are able, that they give you some type of an allowance that would pay for things that they normally might pay for, right? So as an example, if you have lunch money, okay, then they put that money into your checking account and you have to budget for it. Now, this can be hard for some parents to do because, kids run out of money at the end of the month. They have a week left of school. What are they going to do? So what we used to do at our house is we would say, well, if that happens, you can take food from the house to school, and of course they didn't like that because that wasn't cool. But that's an example. If they're driving themselves to school and they get a gas allowance, then you could put the gas into that account, and then they could use their debit card in order to spend all of that. And then that helps the teenagers to start to learn how to budget while they still have the safety net of mom and dad.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to give anybody a chance to unmute and ask a question. Otherwise, we'll go back to some of the registration questions. All right. So, Liesl, what is the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I ever received was, you're replaceable. And I thought this was really good advice for me when I was young in my career. I was doing really well in a job, and I was, as my boss said, I got too big for my britches, and then informed me that, everybody can be replaced no matter how good you are. It sounds kind of harsh, but for me, because of my personality, it was the exact perfect thing to say. And as you can tell, I've never forgot it. So that is the best advice that anybody's ever given to me or said to me. Now, the other thing that I will say, and I've been given this advice a number of times over the years, is don't be afraid to take a risk. And what I mean in that is, maybe you want a job and you really have an interest in a job, and you read the qualifications and you only meet one or two of the qualifications. Take the risk and apply for the job. One, you may get it, but even if you don't, you're going to get exposure to whoever's hiring for that job, and they can help you to figure out, like, what do I need to do in order to be qualified? They may be able to give you a project. They may be able to bring you on in some other capacity, even if it's temporarily, to get you the experience you need. But if you don't put yourself out there and take those risks, You're not, again, back to the networking, you're not going to get that exposure. You're not going to meet people, and you're not going to learn what you need to do to get yourself to where you want to be.
Excellent. Thank you. Was there anything that you can look back on in your high school days that really helped you where you are today and what you are to be where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I could say. First of all, I have a really good parents. Okay. So they were always very encouraging, very supportive of me doing lots of different things. You know, I think that was good. But they also were very big on me being responsible for what I did. So when I say that, so as an example, I was a cheerleader for a couple of years. And they encouraged me to do that. They were very supportive of me, but I had to go to the fundraisers and raise money to buy the cheer outfit. I had to sell the candy bars. I had to do whatever I had to do in order to help to pay for it. And I think that was really important because it taught me the value of money and what it takes in order to do things that I really, really enjoy. The second thing that I would say is, while school was important to me and I did do well in school, I wasn't only focused on my academics. So I did the social stuff too, right? I went to the dances, I went to the football games, I went to the basketball games, I went to the baseball games, I went to the plays, I went to the musicals, whatever. I mean, I would do it all, whether I was in the audience or a participant. And that really helps you to put yourself out there, because we all have to learn to put ourselves out there at some point. And the more that you do it, the easier it gets, right? The more that you give presentations, the easier it gets. The more that you stand up in front of people, the easier that it gets. And so you just have to put yourself out there, make a lot of friends, make a lot of contacts, and don't take life too serious, but take it serious enough so that you're always able to take care of yourself. Excuse me.
Excellent. Thank you. What would you say that you love the most about your job?
The people. So I absolutely love all of the people that I work with. It is just so fun to watch people develop and watch them succeed. Just see that, the light come on when something really cool happens, or they really just get something. See them move on to bigger and better things. Just the people. It's always great to see that. And then also the people on the client side of it, helping them to make their dreams come true, helping them to reach their goals, whatever that might be, helping them to understand finance. A lot of people don't take the time or don't understand finance, and they might be afraid to ask, or they might be embarrassed, and they shouldn't be. We are here as the experts to help people. And not everybody knows as much as we do, because we do it every day and we want to help. And so just knowing that we have the ability to help people so that they can be more confident and they can do what they love, because they don't have to worry about something from a financial perspective because somebody gave them good advice. I mean, that is just so fun and so great, and just makes me excited to get up every day and go to work.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, but so I'll start wrapping us up. So thank you so much, Liesl, and thank you so much for the students and for the educators that are on the call. But before we log off, just our normal announcements. So following the presentation, you will be asked to complete a post-program mindset survey. Just remember, teachers, to send that to your students so that they could be entered into the chance for winning a gift card. We pull the gift card winners on Mondays, so make sure you fill it out by Monday. And then lastly, please join us tomorrow as we welcome Georgie Ortiz from Clifton Larson Allen. And Georgie will be helping us understand those paychecks that we just learned that are part of our income in our budget. So she'll be taking us through taxes and net versus gross income. So if you haven't registered for that, the link will be in the follow-up email that I'll send. And if you have, just keep an eye out for the meeting link in the morning. So thank you so much, Liesl, and thank you so much to everyone on the call. It was a pleasure to be with you all today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Liesl.